Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Yasser Ahmed. Now, some subscribers have requested a Microsoft Web Expression overview video. So this is for chapter 21, web authoring. So previously I have created a video using Adobe Dreamweaver and Fireworks. So this will be a quick video overviewing Microsoft Expression Web. Okay, so let's now look at the web development layers. So the first layer is the presentation layer. The presentation layer is in the CSS. CSS is basically cascading style sheets. So cascading style sheets are basically used to format whole web pages or individual elements. Style sheets could include page layouts using div tags and text and table formatting properties. So let's have a look at the first example. So if I go to my web page, you can see we have a table which has been formatted. The table is a background color. It has properties for the external border as well as properties for the internal border. And some of the text has also been formatted as well. So if I highlight this text here, you can see this is heading 1. Now, if I remove the style sheet, so if I right click and remove the link, are you sure you want to delete the style sheet link? Yes, I do. You can see the formatting for the page has disappeared. Okay, so the table is no longer formatted, the text is no longer formatted. So if I edit undo, let's just edit undo to get the style sheet back, you can see the table style sheet is now being attached again. The table has its properties, so the table is yellow, there's a thick outside border, there's a slimmer internal grid lines, and you can see now the text is center aligned. So the style sheets basically provide formatting to your web page. The whole point of having a style sheet is, imagine you have 10 pages, you want to have the same consistent styles, you can attach one style sheet to many pages. Now let's look at the second layer. So the second layer is the content layer. The content layer is basically in the HTML. So the content layer will include text, images, audio, video, etc. in a web page, and also will be used to create suitable hyperlinks. So if we go back to the example, and then if we go to the code view, this is the HTML basically, and this contains all of the information for your web page. So if I was to click on a picture with a hyperlink in, for example, so this picture here has a hyperlink, then if we go to code, you can see it's basically linking to this JPEG picture here, and it also has a hyperlink to the road bike page. You also have settings for the picture, so how wide the picture is, any alternative text. So if the picture doesn't load up, this text will load up instead. So in the HTML you have all of the content as well as the pictures. You have text as well, so these offers do not get you on the road. So if I highlight this, and then if I go to the design view, you can see it's highlighted this text here. So the content layer includes all of the text, images and audio that will be found on your web page. The content layer is in the HTML. Now the behavior layer includes any scripting language added to a web page or to an individual element, and that could include image effects, pop-up messages, drop-down menus, etc. Okay, so let's now look at HTML. So HTML basically is hypertext markup language. It is the content layer. HTML is used to develop the content layer of the website. The HTML file extension is .htm or HTML. HTML can be written in web authoring software, for example Adobe Dreamweaver or Microsoft Expression Web, or it can be written in a text editing software, for example Notepad. Now if you look at the HTML, you'll notice you have tags which open and close. So you've got the main HTML tag which opens here and closes here. So a tag will close if it has a backward slash. And then you have two tags for the head. So in between the head tags, you basically will have the title of your web page, maybe other additional information such as style sheets which have been attached to your web page. And then you've got the two body tags. So in between the body tags, you'll find the main content of your web page. So let's look at the HTML for the example page. So this was the example page. You'll see if we go to the top, you've got the HTML opening tag and then the HTML closing tag. So it closes with a backward slash. For the heading, so you've got two heads. You've got a head that opens here and then closes here. So the first thing you'll find in the head tag is the title of your web page, and then any style sheets which has basically been linked to your web page. Okay, and then if you go to body, so that's the opening tag for the body, and that's the closing tag. If you highlight anything in between the body tags, this is basically the main content of your web page. So the first line of the body tag, so if you were to click here after the body, this will basically, and then if we go to design, this will bring you to the top of the web page. So if you go to the code, and just beneath the body tag will be the top of the page, and this is the content that's basically is in your web page. It falls between the two body tags. Okay, so if we go back to design, you can see everything that's been highlighted now. Right, let's look at the cascading style sheet, CSS, which is the presentation layer. So the styles can be created separately or embedded into HTML. The CSS file extension is .css. Style sheets could be attached to a number of web pages to give consistent layout and appearance. If you look at the example here, the style sheet has not been attached, so there's no layout or formatting to this web page. In this example, the style sheet has been attached, so now we can insert content into these div tags for the style sheet. So the best way to use the style sheet would be to create one style sheet which could be attached to many web pages, which would give basically consistent formatting to each web page. Each web page would look the same according to the style sheet. Okay, so how would you go about creating a CSS style sheet? So if you're using Microsoft Expression Web, the first thing you need to do is open the software. You go to File, New, CSS, and then you'd have to save the CSS. So I don't like saving at the end. I like to save when I create the style sheet, and then you can press save after you've created each tag. Then to create the actual styles, you need to open up the Manage Styles window. So using this window here will basically help you to eliminate mistakes. Some people do prefer to write the code, but I think it's best if you're new to CSS if you're using this window here. And then to create a new style, you simply click on New Style, and then you write the name of the tags, either H1, H2, etc., into the selector window here. So when you enter in hexadecimal colors, also a tip is to make sure you write it in 6 hexadecimal digits. The first 2 characters are for red, the next middle 2 characters are for green, and the last 2 characters are for blue. Okay, so we're going to be creating a style sheet in a moment. When you open up the CSS window, when this window pops up, you got lots of different options down the side. So you can, if you click on font, you can enter the details for the font family. You can change the size of the font. You can insert a color for the font. If you click on block on the left hand side, you can actually format the alignment of your text. So you can make it center, left to right, justified. If you click on the background, so if you're formatting the background, the body tag, for example, the background of your web page, you can select a color, or you can select to have a background picture for your web page, or you can also format the background color of a table. Now if you click on list style, you can select a particular style for your bullet point. If you're formatting your table, you can click on border, and you can enter some properties for your external border or your internal grid lines. If you want to format the table, so if you click on box, you can enter some padding properties which will make the table a bit thicker. If you want to set the table size, you would have to click on position, and then you can enter the size for your table here. So if you are formatting your background, so the body tag is used to set properties for the web page background. You can either browse and select an image for the background, or you can choose a color. The background repeat option will allow you to choose how the background image will be laid out. So if you're formatting your web page, you need to create a body CSS tag. You need to come to background, and you can either choose to insert a color or browse and insert a picture. Now you've got some repeat options here. If you select no repeat, the picture will not repeat, it will just be here, and then this will be white space. Now if you selected repeat, the picture will repeat like a tile effect. Okay. If you select repeat X, it will basically repeat on a horizontal axis, and if you select repeat Y, it will repeat on a Y axis. So I haven't actually seen the exam question ask you to do this before. Normally the exam question will ask you to repeat the picture in a tiled format. So if that's the case, you would have to select repeat here. Okay. Typical mistake would be if you're formatting your background, you don't want to click on a font and select red here, because this will format your text style. What you need to be is you need to be in background, okay, and you need to make sure you enter your font color into background color, not for the actual font color underneath font. Okay, So tip, make sure your background color is not placed in the font window. That's what we just talked about now. Make sure you place it into the background window. So let's look at the hexadecimal colors, and then we'll move on to creating and applying a CSS style sheet. So the first thing you need to know is it's going to be in order, so red, green and blue. We're going to have 2 characters for each color component. So if you don't want to include a color component, you will include 2 zeros. So if you include FF, FF, FF for red, green and blue, the color will be white. Now if you just included FF for red, which is full red, and no green and no blue component, then the color will be red. If you wanted a full green color, you'd have no components for red, so you'd have 2 zeros there. You could put FF for green and then 2 zeros for blue. If you wanted full color components shown for blue, so you wanted a full blue color, you'd have zeros for red and green, and then you'd have FF shown for blue. Now let's say, for example, we only wanted a quarter of the red color. So imagine you've got 4 buckets of paint. If it was FF, all buckets of paint would be red. So if you mix them together, you're going to have the same color. But if you wanted a quarter, you'd have to write C and 0 for red, for example. And what you'd be doing is basically mixing 3 buckets of paint, of red paint, with 1 bucket of black paint. So this will give you a slightly darker shade of red. If you wanted 50% of a particular color, you'd have to enter 80. And then this would basically mean you're mixing 2 colors of red and 2 colors of black. So two buckets of red paint with 2 buckets of black paint. And this would give you a darker shade of red. Okay, if you wanted a darker shade of blue, you put 80 here and then 0 zeros here. In the mark schemes, previously they've used 60 to represent a darker shade. So if they wanted a darker shade of blue, you'd put 60 here, no green and no red. So if you come down to the bottom, 40 represents a quarter of a particular color, and then at the bottom, if you have all zeros, the color will be black. So the less color you have, the more you're going to be mixing with black. So obviously the less color, what will happen is the shade will get darker. Okay, so now we're going to be actually creating and applying a CSS style sheet. So before we can create and apply the CSS style sheet, we need to make sure you click on File and select CSS, and then you save the style sheet, and then you find this window here. So this window you can find by going to Panels and clicking on Manage Styles. Okay, so let's create the style sheet first of all. Let's close down this page here. I don't want to save any changes. So to create a new style sheet, you need to click on, first of all, File, New, and then select CSS. And before we do anything, I want to save this, and I'm going to save this into this folder here. So the name for the style sheet is Textile CSS Style. So I made one earlier on, so what I'm going to do is just basically click on this and put 2 at the end. So the first thing you should do is save your CSS style sheet, and then it's really important we find this window here. So if you go to Panels, if you don't see it, maybe it's on the side, and if you do see it, you can drag it out into this space here. If not, you can go to Panels and click on Manage Styles. So let's have a closer look at this CSS. What do we need to do? So as you can see, there's a print screen of the CSS I created earlier. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate tags. The first tag is going to be body, which will format the background as yellow. Then we're going to have 2 tags, which will be for heading 1 and heading 2. Then we're going to have styles for our bullets. So we're going to have LI, UL and OL. And if I go to the next slide, you can see without the style sheet, there's no formatting to this page. With the style sheet, the background colors changed to yellow. And then we've applied heading 1, heading 2, and then 2 different list styles as well. This is what this is what the HTML will look like. So when you apply a style, it will say H1 and then you close with a backward slash. So let's get going. Let's start creating a style. So the first style which we need to create is going to be body. So let me do that again. So the first thing we should do is click on New Style. In selector, you type in body. Since body is the background, you don't want to format it here. That was a mistake we mentioned. You go to background And what color is it again? So the background color will be yellow. So we can click here and we can select yellow, and automatically it's placed this using 6 hexadecimal characters. If you click up apply and OK, and it's done the code for you. So let's now create the next style. So if we click on new style, now we're going to be creating H1. So let's enter H1 at the top. Nothing else should appear here. And for the font family, the browser will look for Times as a font. If this font is not available, then it's going to use Times New Roman. And if that's not available, then the browser will go to its default serif font to display heading 1. So if I click down here, let's find the closest one. So we've got this one here. Obviously I need to put Times before Times New Roman, so I can do that in a moment. The alignment will be center. Notice it's the American spelling of center. So if you go to block, text align, yep, center with ER at the end. The size will be 18. So if you go back to font size will be 18. Sometimes they may say points or pixels, just make sure you check to see what it is. And then color will be red. So you've got no components of green or blue. So we can click down and select red, as you can see here. If I click on apply, OK, the code has automatically been generated. And what I need to do is basically move Times in front of Times New Roman, because the browser will check for this font first. If that's not available, then it'll check for Times New Roman. If that's not available, then it'll check for serif. Okay, we can actually have the spaces in between. So that's the first font created, or font style created. Now we're going to be creating H2, which is this one here. Oops. So same method. Let's click on new style. Let's type in H2, and this time the font will be the browser's default sans serif font. So we don't want to have any fonts beforehand. We just need to show sans serif. If they ask you for fonts, you need to include the fonts. If they don't include fonts, then you just include sans serif. Okay, the alignment will be left. The size will be 14. So let's type in 14 for the font size. The alignment, if you go to block, will be on the left side. If we go back to font, the color will be this time blue. So we've got no green, oh sorry, no red, no green, pure blue components. Okay, so we can type in, I'll select the blue color, and you can double check the code. Yes, happy that. Apply. Again, the code has been generated. So now we're going to create a LI, which refers to bullet styles. So let's create a new style. Let's type in LI. Okay. Once you've done that, the bullets will basically have a default serif font. So the browser will check for a default serif font. So let's select this and then delete everything apart from serif. And the size of the bullets will be 16. So if I click here, 16, and then apply, then OK, and that's it for now for the LI. And then the last two styles which we need to create is going to be UL, which is for the unordered list, and OL, and we'll talk about these in a moment, but let's just create them for now. So new style, UL. The color will be red, so we can select red. And then if you go to list style, what type of bullet points do they want? They want you to have a square bullet points. So you can go to list style and you can enter square. Click apply, done. And then finally we need to make the style for OL, which is ordered list. So the color will be blue and the list style will be numbered. So let's select blue and the list style will be numbered. So we can select decimal for numbered lists. Apply, OK. And what I should have really been doing is saving it after each tag, but let's just press save now. So I've created the style sheet. Now the next thing we're going to do actually is I'm going to add my name as a comment. Now to add a comment, you need to add /*, add your comment, and then star and slash. Okay, so if I type in slash and star, you'll notice the text has turned into green because this is now not part of the CSS, it's an additional comment. To close the comment, you need to type in star and then slash. Let's save it again. Okay, so the next thing which we're going to do is we're going to open up the text HTML page, and then we're going to attach the style sheet. So to attach the style sheet, you basically click on this option here to attach style sheet. We'll browse and select the style sheet we just created, and then we're going to highlight the text and apply the styles. Okay, so here we go. So to attach the style sheet, you need to click on attach style sheet. We're going to click on browse, and then we'll select the style sheet we just created, and then we'll highlight the text and apply the styles shown here. So this was the before and this was the after. So let me open up the HTML page now that we're going to be, oops, why have we gone to there again? If we go back to here, so we can close this down now. If I go to file, open, this is a file that we need to basically edit. Okay, so as you can see, there's no formatting applied. To attach the style sheet we just created, click on attach style sheet, browse, and I'm going to select the 1 or 2 at the end. And when I press enter, the first thing you'll notice is the background should change to yellow because that's what we've entered into the CSS for the body tag. Okay, so that's automatically changed. Now we need to apply the styles one by one. So if you highlight heading 1, and then if you come up to here, you can apply heading 1, and that should format the text, make it center aligned red. Let me just go back to CSS. Yeah, so H1 is 18, is red, center aligned. I'm happy with that. Heading 2, if you click up here again, I think should be blue, it should be left align, and 14, yeah, so slightly smaller. Okay, so let's have a look at the 2 types of lists now. So we have unordered list and we have the ordered list. So if you look at your PowerPoint again, for the unordered list, they should appear as red with the square bullet points, and the ordered list should appear blue and should be in some sort of numbered order. So if we go back and we apply the styles, so this is the unordered list, we click on paragraph and we select unordered list, so we should see square bullet points and it should be in red, which we do. And let's do the same for the ordered list, and this should be now in blue and in some sort of order. So the obvious difference between the 2 different types of list is the ordered list appears in order. So you got 1, 2, 3. So if I wanted to add to this, for example, it would go to 5 or 4, then 5 and 6. Okay. Now we also have li. So if I modify the li, and let's say, for example, if I change the size from 16 to 30, you'll see both the unordered list and the ordered list takes characteristics from the li. So if I change this from serif to, let's delete serif, let's insert an Arial sans serif font, you can see both list styles are changing. If you wanted to make them both italic and both bold, you can change the formatting of both lists in li. Okay, let's change it back to what it was. I think it was 14. And we'll leave the font as it is. Okay. Okay, so let's now move on to the next slide. So we've created a style sheet, we apply the styles. Okay, so let's look at the HTML of each of the styles now before we move on. So if we go back to the software, if I highlight heading 1 and go to the code view, you can see H1 is at the start and at the end of H1. For H2, you can see H2 is at the start and at the end. We can also modify from the code view. So let's say we want to modify heading 2 will also be formatted as heading 1. So let's change both these numbers together, and then if we go back to design, you can see heading 1 and heading 2 has the same formatting. If we go back to code, you'll see the 2 types of lists here. So this is the first list, and the list appears as unordered list. Okay, and then you got this list here which appears as ordered list. So the difference is you got UL and close with UL, and here you got OL and you close with OL. So let's say, for example, if I typed in O here, and this needs to be matching because there's a closing tag, Now what we've done is made both list styles ordered. So you can see 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, all the way to 6. If you wanted to change it back to UL, you can simply change the U here. And let's say we wanted to change both lists to unordered, we can change it as well. Okay, so, and let's say for example I want to make these headings appear as H2. What we can do is, so we can go to unordered list, change that P to H2, and we can change this P as well to H2 as well. So remember, when you open a tag, you always close a tag with a backward slash. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at the next slide now. So the unordered list, as mentioned before, there's two ways of applying an unordered list. Actually, there's three different methods. We can highlight the text, you can come up to paragraph, and you can select unordered list or ordered list. For the unordered list, you can also go, you can highlight the text and you can click on the bullet points. For the ordered list, you can click on the numbering bullet points. This is basically the top of the window here. So this is for unordered and this is for ordered. Okay, so let's say for example, let's change this back into an ordered list. We can click up here and to change it back. And finally, what we can do, we can actually change the code. That's what we just did now. So UL basically represents unordered list and OL represents an ordered list. So if you change these values here, they will change accordingly. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. In the most recent exam papers, when creating CSS, they're asking you to use the most efficient syntax. So let's look at this example here. So we've got three separate tags, H1, H2, and a H3. So this is heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. So we've got different characteristics for each of these tags here. So the alignment is different, so left, center, and right. The size is different, 14, 16, and 18. And the color is different, so H1 is red, H2 is green, and H3 is blue. However, what we have is the same font style for H1, H2, and H3. So what we can do, if you look at this example here, we can basically, in a selector, we can write H1, H2, H3, and then we can enter any properties which will be the same for all three tags. So in this example, the font style will be the same for all three tags, so we can do that separately. And then we can create separate tags, H1, and include the separate properties for H1, and the separate properties for H2, and the separate properties for H3. When you're applying any of these font styles, it will still apply the same font family. So the most efficient way of setting the same font style for H1, H2, and H3 is just to put a comma in the selector. So let's have a look at the example. So this was the example when I created, when I clicked a new style for H1, H2, and H3. If I just modify this, you write the styles up here, separated by a comma. You enter or you select any attribute which will be the same for each of the styles at this particular point here. So let's say each of the styles was also bold, okay, and italic. We can do that here, okay. So there's no need now to repeat this information in each of these steps here. So we're basically making it more efficient. So if this was basically repeated for H1, H2, and H3, this would not be the most efficient way of creating a CSS style sheet. Okay. Right. Okay, so now we're going to identify some mistakes in a style sheet. So in the past papers, for paper 1, they have asked you to identify mistakes in the style sheet. So they are starting to mix the practical in with the written element of the course. So this style sheet, the requirements are for the font family, the font style should be Arial. If that's not available, then Helvetica. If both of these fonts are not available, then the browser will display the default sans serif font. So the first mistake here is we have Arial, which is correct. This should be Helvetica, however it says Times New Roman. So that's the first mistake. The font size should be 24 pixels, which is right. The font should also be italic, bold. So the next mistake is we're missing a semicolon. So at the end of each part, there should be a semicolon. For bold, what we're missing is the dash between font and weight. And the color should be red. So all colors should be in hexadecimal. So you should have the hashtag FF for red and then 4 zeros for green and blue. And also again we're missing the semicolon to finish this part of the tag. And in the text align, we should always use American spelling. So this is the UK spelling for center. So you should always use the American spelling. So for center is spelled C-E-N-T-E-R if you follow the American spelling. And then each tag you should close. So H1 should be closed with a bracket as well. So let's look at the correct version of the CSS. So here we have the right font style. So we've got Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. We have the missing semicolon. We have the missing dash between font and weight. And then you can see the color is in hexadecimal format with a hashtag and 6 characters representing red, green and blue. We've got a semicolon, and then we've got center spelled in the American way, and then the closing tag for H1. So this is a typical exam question where you may open a CSS style and it may be incorrect. It may look like this. Okay, so the style sheet contains errors. It should define the following styles. All colors on hexadecimal. So if you look at the example here, you got blue, which is 70, red, which is 19, green, which is 19. So all colors should be displayed in hexadecimal, this format here. Okay, another potential problem is they've given you the colors in the wrong order. So the first one's fine, red, green and blue. However, the second one, if you look, red is in the middle. So you need to always put the red character first, then the green, and then the blue. So red is 19, green is 19, blue is 17. So you don't really need to know what these values mean, but you need to be able to put them into the right order. Okay, so what we need to do before we fix this is, if you are editing the CSS, then the first thing you should do is have the brackets to open and close a tag. So for each tag you should have a bracket which opens and closes the tag. Then you can use the Manage Styles window to enter the correct CSS and delete the old useless code. So the common mistakes are there's no brackets to open and close the tag, so you don't see any brackets here. There's no semicolons to separate parts of the CSS. The colors in the wrong order, the spelling mistakes, so they may have used UK spelling rather than American spellings. And then there's unnecessary text. So things like 30 pixels high. We don't need 30 pixels high, you just need px. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to open this file and we're going to actually fix the mistakes. So let's go back to web expression. Let's close down these two files. I don't need them anymore. No. Okay, and it was one of the most recent files I opened. So style, let me double check the name. So open a file J1531 style 2. So it's going to be this file here. And as you can see, there's no sort of formatting. So it appears like this at the bottom. So let me zoom in. The first thing which we're going to do, if you are editing the CSS, then or fixing the CSS, we're going to put the brackets in place. So if I go back to here, I'm going to put some spaces in between the tags. So you got body, H1, H2, H3, and then this is the Manage Styles panel. So this, you need to have this panels available. So if you go to Panels, Manage Styles, if you don't see it, you'll notice no styles are appearing. So body, H1, H2, H3, table, they don't appear here. So we can't fix anything yet. So let's put the brackets in. So it's these like curly brackets. You have to always open and close the brackets. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the text. Okay, so let's actually delete the text first. And in web expression, if you open a bracket, automatically it closes the bracket for you. And you'll notice body and H1 now appear on the Manage Styles panel. So we can edit that in a moment. Let's delete this text. Let's put the brackets in. Again, let's delete this text here. Put the brackets in. And let's put the brackets in again. So now all of the styles appear here. So now what we're expected to do is let's have a look. So for the background, so for body, the background picture will be j1531bg.jpg. So if I go to body and modify body now, so let's right click, modify style. Let's go to background. Let's browse for the picture. So I think it's this one here. So let me double check again. What's the file name? So J1531bg. So let's select this file. Okay, yep, that's that part done. Apply. So we have a background picture, body is correct. Let's now modify H1. So let's open this panel here. So for H1, the font will be Helvetica. If that's not available, Arial, and then the default sans serif. So we may have to switch this around. So let me see where we can see Helvetica. Yeah, I might have to switch this around in a second. The color is in the right order, so it's basically going to be red is 8B, green, we're going to have two components for green, so it'll be 2 zeros, and for blue we'll have 2 zeros as well. So 8B, let me just copy this in. B and then 2 zeros for green and 2 zeros for blue. Okay, so on the first part, italic 30 pixels high. So font style will be italic. Font size will be 30 pixels. And then if you go to block, I think the text align is going to be center. So text align center. So you notice the American spelling. So you got ER. Okay, so once you've done that, apply. Then I think what I need to do is, yeah, Helvetica, it needs to go before Arial. Okay, so what we can do is we can simply cut this out and put that before Arial. Space, and get rid of the space here. So that's the H1 completed now. Let's look at H2. Okay, so let's modify H2. So H2 again is going to be Helvetica. If not Arial, then the browser's default sans serif. We're not expected to use the most simple syntax, so we're going to just do it again as we did before. So let's select Arial, Helvetica, then sans serif. If the question asks us to use the most efficient method, then you can do H1 and H2 together and simplify this. Okay. Okay, 20 pixels high, align center. And go to block. Text align will be center. And then for the color, notice they give you the colors in the wrong order. So always put a red first. Red is 19, then green is next, which is 19, and then blue is 70. So you don't need to know what these values are, just as long as you put them in the right order. So I'm copying and pasting them into here. Okay, apply, done. Let's now look at H3. So let's modify this. For H3, the browser's default serif font. So we can click here and we can select anything that contains serif and delete the font styles beforehand. So the browser will by default select the serif font, which is the most available in the browser. Right, the size of the font will be 16 pixels high and aligned to the left. So let's put in 16 for the size. If we go to block, we can go to text align, put in the left hand side. And then what we need to do is to put the colors in the right order. So again, red goes first. So we always have two characters representing each color. So 2 zeros for red, 2 zeros for green. And then we're going to have basically have 50% of blue, which is 80. Okay, so put the colors in, make sure you write them in the right order, include a hashtag. Okay, and then finally, no visible borders or grid lines. So that also includes the internal grid lines, which is TD, which we'll come to soon. So if we modify this style here, if you place a comma, then type in TD, then go to border. So basically, no visible table borders or grid lines. So if you type in 0, apply, so both the external and internal border will not be showing. Apply, OK. Correct and complete the style sheet. All color codes must be in 6-digit hexadecimal form. That's what we've done here. The style sheet must contain no HTML tags. Okay, so let me just zoom out. So the first thing we did was we put the brackets in and we deleted the text, which was not necessary. Then we used the Manage Styles window to enter the correct CSS. So you can delete the old useless code at the end or at the start. I prefer to do it at the start, to be honest. So we've gone from this to this. So now we used correct CSS tags. We've got semicolons in the right place. We've got rid of the useless text, and all color codes are now in hexadecimal format. Okay, so let's now go to the next slide. Now we're going to be looking at creating style sheets for tables. So this example here is from November 2014. Now when you have internal grid lines, you have to create an additional tag called TD. So TD basically refers to the internal grid lines. Okay. If you have an external border, you have to create this attribute in the table tag. So the external border is a border on the outside of the table. Now for each border you normally have three properties. So the style, the size, which is in thickness in pixels, and then the color. So the style typically will be solid. So looking at this example here, both borders will be solid, okay, and both borders will be navy blue. So both borders will be solid for TD, the internal grid lines, and also for the external table. And both colors will be navy blue. So for navy blue we can put down 80, which is 50% of the color. Now the only difference between the two borders is the internal grid line will be 2 pixels. Okay, so these grid lines will be 2 pixels, and the external border will be 4 pixels. So my advice is, before we create the style sheet, identify what we do for TD and do that first. So let's create the style sheet. So if I go to web expression, let's close down this one. I don't want to save the changes. If I go to file, new, CSS style sheet. So let's identify the TD requirements first of all. So if let me save this before I do anything. So save as, I'll just save it here for now. Table CSS. Okay, so we're going to create the TD tag first. So let's click on new style. Let's enter TD, and then we go to border. So what do we know about the internal grid lines? So the internal grid lines will be 2 pixels. So let's put that in here. Both borders, both TD and table, both the internal and external borders will be solid. So as you can see, we've got solid both tables. So the other options would be dashed, dotted, double. So what we want is solid. And the external color will be the same as the internal grid lines. So both borders will be navy blue. So if I select blue for now, let's just select 80 for navy blue. If you click apply, the TD should normally come onto one line. So we've got 3 requirements. We've got the thickness of the border, the type, so it's going to be solid, and then we have the color here. Now anything else we can do in the table tag. So now what we need to do is click on new style. Let's enter table, and the first thing we'll do is now the external border. So we know the border style is solid. The border color is going to be navy blue, so we can type in 80. And the only thing different about this external border is this border is 4 pixels compared to this border, which is 2 pixels. So the external border will be 4 pixels. Let's click apply so far. So far we have the internal border, internal grid lines, and then we also now have the external grid lines. The external grid lines will go in the table. The internal grid lines will go on the TD. The only thing different about this table or the grid lines at this moment in time is the external border will be slightly thicker. Okay, now we can also do the rest of these requirements in table as well. So the table will have a yellow background. So for background, go to background and select yellow. Okay, the table will be 80% of the window. So if I go to box, actually no, it's not box, it's position, and if you type in 80 and change the measurement to percentage, so when you resize the table will automatically resize according to 80% of the window size. The borders will be collapsed, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So to collapse the borders, you go to table, you click on border collapse, and you select collapse. We've done the external borders. Cell padding to the top and bottom will be 10 pixels. So if you go to box, so the top and bottom is 10 pixels, and the left and right is 20 pixels. So this will make the cells a little bit thicker. Okay, and the text center aligned in all cells. So if you go to block, we can go to text align, and we can click on center. Then if we click on apply, that's the CSS done now. So remember, the first thing we should focus on is the internal grid lines. So identify the 3 components for the internal grid line. So you should have the style, the size, and the color. Okay, some of these settings, just before I show you the actual example of it attached, some tags from table would also work in TD, like a text alignment or cell padding. So sometimes when you're looking at mark schemes, you'll see maybe the background color placed in TD as well. But it doesn't really matter as long as it works. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to open up the file which we attached it to. So let me go to open. If I go to documents, web expression, 2014 winter. Okay, and we created a style sheet for this particular task here. So you can see here we have TD and table. So the table has an external border which is 4 pixels thick, it's like a navy blue, and then an internal grid line which is also navy blue but slightly thick, less thick, so it's 2 pixels. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to edit the internal grid lines, you go to TD, you go to modify style. The only thing you should be doing in TD is the border. So let's say we wanted a red border, for example, which will be thicker. We go to 4 pixels, and you can see the internal borders has changed. Okay, if you wanted to change the external border, you go to table, modify style, border. So let's change this to green, for example. Okay, and let's make this maybe dashed so you can see the difference. So now we have an external border which is dashed, is green, is 4 pixels thick. So that's basically the table CSS style. If I go to the next slide, this is what happens if you don't include border collapse. So border collapse is on the table, then you can select the collapse here. So in the example shown, the border has been collapsed. The 2 lines here has been collapsed into 1 line. If I take off the border collapse, you'll see what happens in a moment. So if I go back to table, let's modify the table. Actually, let's put this back to what it was. So if I press Ctrl Z, so if it's not going back by pressing Ctrl Z, let's just go to modify TD style, border. Let's put it back to what it was. This was 2 pixels thick, and it was navy blue. Okay, what I want to show you is, yep, it's gone back to what it was. If I go to table and go to modify style, and if I go to table and take the collapse off, you'll see you got double lines now. So that's what basically the table collapse does, the border collapse. So if we modify the style again and go back to table and select collapse, you can see the lines basically join into one. Okay, right. Let's now look at the next slide. So here we're going to be using the most efficient syntax. So you'll see both borders, internal grid lines and external grid lines, share 2 properties which are the same. So both sets of borders will be solid and will be 2 pixels thick. So what you can do, you can type, when you're creating a new CSS style, table, comma, TD. If you go to border, you can type in solid and 2 pixels. And this is the code. So you'll see this is the most efficient way of setting the same properties for 2 separate tags. So the external and internal border will both be solid and will both be 2 pixels thick. And then what you can do, you can create a separate table tag to include the external border color, which will be red, and any other properties for the table. So the background color will be yellow, the table will be 80% wide, and the borders will be all collapsed. And then you can also create a separate TD tag to set the internal grid lines to black. So this is where we use the most efficient syntax in creating the CSS for the table. if I go to the previous example, you can see if the question did ask us to use the most efficient syntax, both the TD and table share two properties which are the same. So both border types will be solid and both share the same color. So you could have done use this method here. So table comma TD, border style solid, border color navy blue. Okay, so let's now go to the next slide. So we're going to be looking at a hierarchy of multiple attached style sheets. So to attach a style sheet, you need to make sure you've opened up the Manage Styles panel. To attach the style sheet, you click on this option here, and then you need to click on Browse to select the style sheet you want to attach. Once you've found the style sheet, you click on OK to attach the style sheet. So looking at the example here, we're going to have two style sheets and then one HTML page which contains two tables. So the first style sheet, when you attach it, the background color of both tables will change to yellow and the table size will be set as well. In the second style sheet, we're going to have some border settings for the external border, which will be 3 pixels thick, solid, and the border color will be red. And then the background color will change to green from yellow. So adding additional style sheets will overrule elements from the previously attached style sheets. So the changes here will be the background color and the external border. What will remain the same will be the table size. So we don't have any table size properties in the second style sheet. So we will still use the properties from the first style sheet. So let me go to the example. Okay, so let's open up all of the files. So if we go to open, that's a HTML file which contains two tables. And let me also open up the CSS files as well. So this is the first CSS style sheet. The background color of the table will be yellow. And we also have the table size set as well. And the second CSS style sheet, we now have the external border which has been set in table. So the border will be 3 pixels thick, it will be solid, and the color will be red. And then the background color of the table will be green. If I go to the HTML page, you'll notice we don't have any style sheets attached. We do have two tables, as you can see here, but with no formatting. So if I attach the first style sheet, so click on attach, browse, double click on CSS1. Okay, you can see both tables are now have the same background color and both tables have changed to yellow. So if I was to insert another table, for example, insert table, I don't want to specify the size because CSS will look after that. Doesn't matter how many rows and columns we put into place, the next table will also take on the same formatting. Now if I attach the second style sheet, so if I click on here, attach style sheet, browse, and click on CSS2, you can see I've got the second style sheet. What's remained the same from the first style sheet is the table size. So the table size hasn't changed from the first style sheet, but the second style sheet has basically changed the background color from yellow to green, and then it's also added the the external border to the table. So let's say, for example, in the first style sheet, if I modify, go to modify style, go to position, and if I change the size of the table, so let's make it 200 by 200, apply, you'll see all the tables have changed styles because the size of the table is only defined in the first style sheet. It's not defined in the second style sheet. So whatever's defined in the first style sheet will still be used in the HTML page. However, in the second style sheet, if I was to define, if I go to table, modify style, position, and if I type in like 400 by 500 here, this will now overrule the first CSS. So if I go back to the HTML, you can see because we've got the sizes in both style sheets, the second style sheet that we attached will overrule the first style sheet. Okay, so now we've come to the end of the first part of the Microsoft Expression Web overview video. Please join us for the second part, which will be coming very soon, hopefully. So please like and share this video. Thanks for your time. Please show your support to the channel, subscribe below. Thanks again for your time.